That's good. So, well, yeah, just to kick off, really, just to say thank you very much for coming, and delighted to introduce Sophie. So, Sophie's been our social media manager at Make Music Day now. I think it's coming up for a year, Sophie, isn't it, or maybe
Yeah,
even a bit more.
yeah,
So,
something
Sophie
like
has
that.
been through like the whole cycle of Make Music Day and done some some brilliant things for us, and our social media stats last year were fantastic. So, I'll just leave it all to you, and I'll keep out of the way. Okay.
Great, thanks, Paul. So I'm just going to yeah, just hide you guys, as I said, do shout out if you have any questions. So the idea with today's workshop is just to learn some of the basic fundamentals that you might need while you're promoting your event, while you're looking to kind of reach new audiences with the activities that you're doing. And I think that sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming when you're getting started with social media, or you set up a couple of different accounts and you're not quite sure what to do with them, where to go with them, and how to kind of tell what's working. So what I'll do is just give you a little bit of an overview about kind of social media planning and strategy for these types of events, then talk through each of the kind of main channels that you might be using, and then a little bit on kind of planning and metrics at the end. So just starting off with a kind of overview, really. So different social media platforms have different individual strengths and weaknesses, as well as different audiences who are expecting different things from the people and brands that they interact with on each one. So that's kind of the importance of knowing which channel you're posting to and why, and who you have on there following you and what they're looking for. In every instance, that content is key, whether you create it yourselves or whether you're kind of gathering it from other sources. And on that front, you're aiming for consistency and clarity, both in terms of the content and also things like the regularity with which you post, the tone of voice, things like that, so that your audience can quickly see what benefit you will be offering to them in return for them to agreeing to follow you. So it's just thinking about that kind of what are the people who follow you getting from following you, and what's that kind of benefit to them, and making sure that your content is sort of speaking to that rather than just kind of treating it as a shop window. So in order to do that, you need to learn who your existing digital audience is, and most of the major platforms have some great kind of metrics and analytics that you can look into around demographic data. If that's not something that you already track, you can find all that stuff out. And also just thinking about where your growth audiences are for each channel. So what that means is looking at, okay, who are we trying to reach with our events, with our activities, whatever it is that we're offering as either as an organization or a community group or as an individual. Who are we trying to reach who don't kind of currently follow us, and where potentially could we find them? So that's just kind of an overview of things to consider. And then it looks like a lot of words. I know that there's a plan to circulate this after the meeting this evening. So I thought I'd get it all on there so that you're not furiously trying to scribble notes. And that way Paul can circulate this afterwards, and it'll all be there for you. So Facebook is very much a community-led platform, which is why I've started with Facebook. I think you might find this yourselves, that you probably get the best kind of engagement and interaction and following and things like that for the types of activities that we're talking about as part of Make Music Day. And it also offers the greatest opportunities to grow your digital audience through organic shares and paid promotion. And that's why it's sort of really worth making sure that you're really active on there. So engagement should be your focus for that reason. So you can track that through views, likes, shares, and comments. So it's kind of, if you think about engagement as a metric, and I'll talk a little bit about metrics later, but it's thinking of it in terms of where someone actually has to interact with you in a meaningful way. So it's not just that they scroll past your post, which would be something like reach, for example. Depending on the platform, they call it slightly different things, but if they've taken an action, they've liked it, they've shared it, they've commented it. Views, where they've watched like the whole of a video rather than the first 5 seconds, that's when we can say, right, okay, they really are engaging with the content. So Facebook hosts an enormous amount of daily content, and in order to manage this weight, it will seek to prioritize which items people actually see in their feeds. So as such, Facebook constantly uses your followers as a focus group for your posts, and if they do not respond in a way that indicates that they see value in your content, Facebook will simply stop showing your posts to them. So you've probably heard people talking about like algorithms on Facebook and on other social media platforms, and it can feel a bit like, what does that mean? And basically, they are a way of tracking how much value your audience are getting, as I talked about in the last slide, from your content and from your posts, and basically will upweight or downweight your posts to your audience based on how much value they seem to be getting from it. So that's why it's really important to prioritize quality over quantity and to give people a reason to like, comment, and share to boost those engagement metrics. So for content, looking at comparable events to see what perform as well, thinking about what you yourself would want to see and what would make you want to engage with an event online and also convert eventually to attending that event. So it's kind of doing that little bit of research, desktop research, and kind of reflection around what you think might work, as well as obviously tracking those engagement stats as you begin to share things to promote your event. So promotion and seeding. So there's kind of two ways of sort of boosting your content basically there. You can use the Facebook Ad Manager to run paid promotion for your event if you have the budget to do so. Obviously, I know some people on this call might be representing organizations, companies. You might have like a small pocket of money that you can tap into. If you're a community group and you're all run by volunteers and things like that, perhaps that's not something that you would be doing. But what you can do for free, other than it takes a little bit of time, is called content seeding. So that is around kind of researching pages on Facebook which are relevant to your event, whether that's because they're local community pages or just location-based pages. You know, it could be a page that's all about the town that you live in, or it could be about the interest, so it could be around music making, things like that, in order to share your content with relevant audiences. And I think sometimes people can be a little bit reluctant to do this because there's a sense that, well, I don't want to go and kind of jump on someone else's page and kind of share stuff that is, you know, for a different organization or a different activity. But I think it's worth considering that a lot of those pages, they are looking for content and they're seeking that out. They want to provide that value to their audiences. So as long as what you're sharing is relevant and appropriate to their audience, that is part of participating in that community, in that online space. You know, you can always begin to forge relationships with the people who run those pages if they were a super relevant audience for you. Just dropping them a message by direct message and saying, hey, we're this community group, or we're this organization, we're working locally to run some events around music making in June. You know, would you be able to help us promote this to your audience? And are you okay if we share this regularly and things like that, if that's what you prefer to do? But it's just about kind of tapping into those audiences where you can't pay Facebook to kind of automate that process for you. With a little bit of research, you can still target those local groups and those interest-led groups. You just have to do the kind of research to find, okay, so where does that audience exist if they're not already following us? So next one is Twitter. So it's a slightly, you know, it's a different expectation from what people look for on Facebook. It's very much around seeking to engage with timely, topical content, looking for discussion-led, non-visual topics such as science and politics, also arts and culture in this context. Overall engagement for individual pieces of content is likely to be lower than it is on other platforms. So you're not going to see, well, you may here and there, but you're not going to see sort of dozens of retweets unless you have a very big following, and that represents still a tiny fraction of your following. So as a result, the kind of time you spend creating content for that platform should be taking up a proportionately smaller amount of time. However, it should be noted that because there's such a flood of content on there all the time, there's a much higher tolerance for sharing stuff more than once, as long as you space it out. And so, you know, don't just retweet your own tweets again and again and again, but if you sort of spread it out here and there, or you retweet a particular image or something like that you've used before, there's a little bit higher tolerance for that than there is on other platforms. Tagging relevant people and partners is key. So I think that's sort of similar to what I talked about with content seeding on Facebook. It's just about making sure that you know who might be able to help boost your post by sharing the content or resharing the content that you have posted yourself. So it's just about making sure you know who those people are, and again, you have those relationships with them so that they can reshare things, particularly if it's somebody with kind of a big influence within the groups that you're looking to sort of target for your event. Say, for example, you know, it could be like a local MP, or, you know, somebody else that's a figure of note within the local area that perhaps you want to kind of tap into their network. So use of hashtags, there's a little dash have crept in there somehow, but it's just to say, you know, this is a platform where there is a level of hashtags are still used. They're not what they used to be in terms of clustering topics, because now kind of things will coalesce whether or not people have hashtagged a particular topic or not. If they're talking about it, then it will be picked up as being kind of part of that conversation on Twitter. But it is still worth having a look at which are the most relevant hashtags for your event or for your local area and things like that, and just using those in a kind of sparing but kind of quite mindful fashion, so that you're really using the best ones rather than just hashtagging 101 different things, or using hashtags that aren't super, well, they're relevant but they're not super targeted. Like, for example, if you just hashtag music on all of your posts, it is relevant and probably people will like it, because there'll be certain people out there /bots who are just liking everything that comes up on that hashtag, but it's not going to actually achieve like any meaningful engagement with your audience or with a new audience, and it's not going to convert to people attending to your event. So that's just something to consider. And again, as I said, content can be seeded to other groups and communities, and it is worth offering people content on a number of platforms at once. So if you've got a page that says, you know, if it's your Make Music Day UK event page, or you've got another page where you've kind of got more information about the event or your website or anything like that, or you've got a video that you want to promote that's maybe on YouTube, you can definitely post that on multiple platforms at once, especially for Facebook and Twitter. Obviously both have the facility to link to content elsewhere, so it's worth doing that and not being afraid to do it. It's just being mindful that not all content will work for both. It depends on what the specific content is or the specific call to action. This seems to have gone backwards. That's interesting. I don't know why the animations are working in reverse there, but Instagram. So Instagram is a slightly different beast than the ones we've just sort of talked about. So it's more of an inspirational, aspiration-based platform. It's populated with visually appealing photographs, accompanied by insightful, valuable captions. There are sometimes graphics shared on Instagram, but there's an expectation that they're a reasonably high quality. So unless you are confident in your kind of design abilities on Canva or wherever else, you know, it's better to kind of focus on really high quality photography for Instagram. It's generally a younger audience than Facebook, although it's not as young as a platform like TikTok. There is an expectation of high aesthetic quality, and also that particularly for your kind of grid, which I'll come on to in a second, but you know, the main posts that you're sharing that are permanent to your kind of feed, that the cohesion is high visually. So it's not just like loads of different images, all different quality, all different styles. That won't satisfy the user expectations on Instagram, because they're looking for something that's a bit more kind of curated. That's more for the grid side of things. For the other post types that you can share on Instagram, which are stories and reels, though there's a bit more of a tolerance for them being a little bit kind of more homemade-y sort of thing. So you can share time-limited stories or reels, or more permanent posts on your grid, which can be photos or videos. You can't link to external content in grid posts. You can in reels and stories, but it's just worth thinking if what you're looking to do is drive people to your to an external website that's hosting either an event page or a video or anything else that you kind of want to drive people to. That's not a facility that Instagram offers. So you either need to say, check out our website, or there is obviously the option to put the link in your bio. You've probably seen people put link in bio in some of their posts. So this is just an example content plan. So this is just to help you kind of think about, like, what are we sharing on what channel, which day of the week are we sharing it, any notes on how it performed, just sort of developing something like that. You can also, if it's more helpful to you in the way that you're kind of preferring to plan, especially in the run up to an event, to do it as a timeline, to just have kind of the days of the week mapped out and do it that way. Say which platforms you'll be posting what on and when, and maybe just tracking maybe how things perform as time goes on, just so that you're not feeling like you have to kind of come up with something to post because you need to post something. So a final thought around metrics, which is just to say that there's, as I kind of mentioned earlier, there's metrics that are kind of volume metrics, we call them, which are things like reach and views. So it's kind of like, sometimes you see these really huge numbers and it seems like, wow, it reached so many people, but that could mean they scrolled past it. That could mean it was in their feed, but they never even scrolled that far. It might mean that they kind of glanced at it, but it's not a meaningful interaction with the content, with the post. Whereas engagement, as I said earlier, that really kind of demonstrates that you are engaging with that content. So it's just about having that in mind, and when you're trying to track what works and what doesn't for you and for your audience. Obviously, if you're fairly established on social media with your activities, you might already have your own benchmarks, but it is also worth looking at comparable events or organizations, if you don't have them, to kind of see, right, okay, well, what kind of engagement rates are they tending to get, and that might help you to have a sense of kind of how things are performing. Because obviously it is no point being a local community music group and comparing your engagement level to like something shared by Adidas or something like that. It's just, there's no point. So it's about kind of working out what's a relevant benchmark and having realistic expectations about how your content and your posts will perform. So yeah, the final thing is just about reflecting regularly on what has performed well and acting on the insights. So if you notice that videos work really well for you on Instagram but not really on Facebook, keep posting them on Instagram, stop posting them on Facebook. It's kind of as simple as that. It's just looking at how things perform, and what's sort of helping you to engage with your audience, and kind of doing more of that, and then not being afraid to do less of where it's not working. So if you find that literally no one's following you, as you're doing everything you can, no one's following you on Twitter, and you're posting regularly, and you're kind of thinking about what works and trying to replicate what comparable organizations or events are doing, there's no shame in saying, you know what, Twitter just isn't where our audience is, and just maybe focusing on Facebook. Or, obviously it depends on what the actual insights are that you're gaining. That's just a kind of an example, but it's about kind of focusing your efforts, especially where you're kind of, if you are working in a voluntary capacity or in a community activism capacity, there's only so much time, and it's better to focus it on what works well and what's going to make sure that you get a big crowd on the day at your event.
So probably that's the moment to say, first of all, thank you so much, Sophie. There's absolutely tons and tons in there. And also just to say thank you very much for everyone else for making the effort to come and join us this evening. And stay in touch and have a good Make Music Day when it comes round.